There's something about concept art that has always fascinated me, especially when it comes to gaming. Seeing the inner workings and ideas that didn't make the cut just interests me massively, especially when it comes to Plants vs Zombies, which has a very active community, constantly churning out fan-made content. A lot of PopCap's unused artwork has been recreated in some form or another. While there is a plethora of PvZ art we could get into, today I want to focus on the unused world of Plants vs Zombies 2, starting off with the farm world. Much of the concept art for this world can be found in the Art of Plants vs Zombies book, released almost 10 years ago in April 2014. The idea of the first world potentially being a farm intrigues me, especially as it's an idea that PopCap had already explored in Plants vs Zombies Adventures. While the Facebook PvZ game didn't get a good ending, the boony section of the game had many farm elements, so perhaps this originally gave the devs a good place to start. How would a farm world work in a more traditional Plants vs Zombies style? Using the farm world could have made sense, allowing the game to introduce the core mechanics before the time traveling chaos begins. However, perhaps they thought the world just felt too different, too themed, which eventually led them to decide to start with Dave's more normal original yard. According to the PvZ wiki, there was also a post-tutorial world that was later scrapped for some reason. While the farm world didn't make its way into the game the way the concept art envisioned it, parts of it were used to bring the Wild West to life. Almost all the zombies, excluding the farmer themed ones, were added to the Wild West. For those who got to play the original version of Plants vs Zombies 3, the pre-2021 version, you might remember Sunnyfield Farm. Essentially, it allowed PopCap to use all these ideas that were once scrapped. The pitchfork zombie made its debut, and we got introduced to the farmyard version of the outhouse zombie. It's interesting that while we had a farm section in PvZ 3, there were only a couple of farm zombies. However, as we're all aware, that version of Plants vs Zombies 3 didn't last. Similarly, fans of the very popular Reflourished mod may also recall the Harvest event that took place around 4 months ago, where many of the concepts we've been looking at were brought to life and expanded upon. In the original concept art, the zombies took on a different visual approach with an over-exaggerated jawline and bucked teeth, but the Reflourished team brought them more in line with the existing PvZ2 art style, which made sense. Many zombies received farmer costumes, and they even created these awesome pieces of story art that look fantastic. While we have a good amount of info about the farm world, the next section of world concepts is not as fleshed out, with relatively no context behind them, but they're still really interesting. So let's talk about this football field arena piece of concept. While I feel this may have not worked as a new world, I think it was a really good idea for a separate game mode. Maybe this is what Plants vs Zombies 2's version of Versus mode could have looked like. Furthermore, you may remember some unseen concept art that was discovered last year, giving us a glimpse of a Plants vs Zombies sports game, so I think those ideas had been floating around for quite some time. Taking a different approach entirely, this next piece of concept art takes us to Paris, as you can see from the Eiffel Tower in the background. Again, not much is known about this piece. I always thought a Plants vs Zombies game that took players around the globe would be really cool, and maybe that's where this came from. Perhaps traveling the world was an idea they had before traveling through time. Then we have a selection of 3 different pieces of concept art that all appear to depict a woodland area at different times of the year. Apologies, the image quality isn't the best, but clearly some thinking was being made around a forest. Maybe Weirding Woods was going to feature in PvZ 2. Finally, let's touch on some worlds that did make it into the game but had some alternative ideas surrounding them. Going in chronological order, let's talk ancient Egypt, as we have a sketch that looks to have taken an Indiana Jones kind of approach. The scene is more of a dig site rather than actually set in ancient Egypt. Perhaps this was going to be the original tutorial opening world where at the dig site, Dr. Zomboss and Crazy Dave stumble across the time traveling technology. I don't know. I also enjoy this other concept which features a giant portal. It's interesting that this is something we eventually got to see in the Garden Warfare games and BFN. It's nice to see that PopCap didn't waste good ideas, they revisited them to use in later titles. Moving on, we have some awesome sketches of various worlds, including Pirate Seas, Wild West, and Dark Ages. It's interesting to see the high level of detail in these sketches and compare how much of the set dressing had to be toned down or removed completely to accommodate optimization and possibly other reasons too. However, there were other worlds where much more detail did get added. For example, this early sketch of Frostbite Caves, which was going to be called the Ice Age at some point. The sketch is quite bare bones, with the cave and such being less eccentric, no giant ice sculpture or mammoth tusks like we got in the final version. There's also this small sketch of an alternative version of the world map island. Lastly, we have some Jurassic Marsh concepts, or Dino World as it was originally known, as well as this nicely worked up sketch. Over on the right, I really like how images of references for this piece were included. There are also a couple of notes with some sketches of the plant house, as well as a colour palette test. I reckon Jurassic Marsh was a really fun world to work on from the artist's perspective. In summary, the Plants vs Zombies 2 world concept art reveals some really intriguing insights into the creative process behind the game's development. The unused farm world initially considered for the game inspired elements for subsequent levels. The introduction of Sunnyfield Farm in Plants vs Zombies 3 showcased the revival of scrapped ideas. Additionally, other concepts such as the football field and Paris hinted at potential game modes or global settings. But overall, the concept art provides a really fascinating glimpse into the game's design decisions and the creative journey undertaken by the devs. Anyway guys, that's about it for Plants vs Zombies 2 world concept art for now. I hope you enjoyed it. There's bound to be some stuff I've missed, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But other than that, remember to like and subscribe to stay up to date with everything PvZ. Okay, thanks guys, bye.